And so I just, before we get started with where we left off last time, which is on page 79 in our text, 1 Samuel chapter 14, beginning with verse 24, we're in the midst of, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So the Philistines have just been routed through the help of Saul's son Jonathan, and then so that's what we read about. I read ahead a little while ago for the rest of the chapter, and it's going to be a little bit confusing, but still, any questions left over from last time before we pick up again? Okay, so like I said, page 79, verse 24. We'll read a few verses before looking at the commentary. So again, we don't have to read over again what we missed. It's just that it's a rout of the Philistines. So, V'ish Yisrael nigash bayom hahu, vayoel Shaul et ha'am lemor, arur ha'ish, asher yochal lechem ad ha'erev, v'nikamti me'oivai, velo ta'am kol ha'am lachem. So, the people of Israel, Nigas, I read Nigash, sorry, it's Nigas bayomahu. So the men of Israel were distressed on that day. Saul adjured the people, saying, "Cursed be the man who will eat bread during the day, that is, from now until the evening, and I will be avenged on my enemies." And the people did not taste bread. So I alluded to the fact that I read through to the end of the chapter and how it's confusing. I'm not sure why the people of Israel would be distressed that day, since they had just defeated the Philistines. What's there to be distressed about? Right? Verse 23, so the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed on as far as Beit Aven. So they defeated the Philistines. What's there to be distressed about? So okay, so if we look down below, we're distressed with hunger and weariness. Okay, so usually that's not a response to winning a battle. Like, you don't read about battles being won and the people complaining of hunger at the end of a battle. Usually it's because if they've routed the people that they're fighting, they're taking back spoils from the war, and it would be the opposite of hunger. They would gorge themselves on a feast of the animals, the flocks that they have been able to take as loot. So just this response that, boy, what a long day in battle. I'm famished, or I'm tired. It's just not the usual thing. There is a response like this if Israelites lose, but not if they win. So and the comments go on. That eat any food, Saul feared that his men might relinquish the pursuit of the Philistines to get themselves food. The vow was rash, and as Jonathan appreciated, hindered rather than helped the pursuit, as well as leading indirectly to the sin of the people. So, which comes up in verse 32. So let's look at Alter on this, which is on page 315. His comments on verse 24 below the line. And the men of Israel were hard pressed. So that's how he translates the word nigas, which our translation had said distressed. The explanation for being hard pressed is not certain. The Hebrew term nigas most naturally refers to being at a military disadvantage. But here, the Israelites appear to have the upper hand, right? They just caused the Philistine army, the garrison, to disperse. The other possibility is that the men are weak from hunger, not having had the opportunity to eat in their hot pursuit of the Philistines. The oath Saul exacts would then compound this predicament. It should be said that the Septuagint, remember the Greek translation, reflects a different text for this entire clause. And Saul committed a great blunder. Oh. Is everything okay? You're still hearing me and everything? Okay. Zoom just gave me a message that I've been signed in on another device. And I'm not sure how that is because I'm on this device. But hopefully we won't be cut off. Because I'm not sure what other device I'm signed on to. Okay. So the Septuagint changes the translation to, and Saul committed a great blunder on that day. So now the advantage of the Greek translation, as we've seen, is that it fixes things in a text and makes the flow of the narrative work better. So we're going to be reading in the rest of this chapter about a blunder that Saul makes. And so perhaps in trying to edit the text to make it work better, the Septuagint changes the language. So it's unclear what they change it to in the Hebrew, but they wouldn't have changed it to it in the Hebrew because it's a Greek translation. So to work back from the Greek translation to figure out what the Hebrew wording would have been, so Alter doesn't tell us what that is. Okay, so he's as perplexed as we are as to what the distress would be. Cursed be the man who eats food, as we shall have occasion to see later in the David narrative. It was a fairly common practice, though by no means an automatic one, for fighting men to take on themselves a vow of abstinence from food in order to enter the battle in what amounted to a state of dedicated ritual purity. But Saul, in this instance, makes a miscalculation, imposing a fast on hungry men in an effort to force the hand of divinity. Thus, the Septuagint's version of the first clause of this verse might be regarded as an interpretive gloss on the lapidary formulation of the received text. In other words, it makes sense for the Septuagint to change in order to make sense of what Saul is doing here, right? If the people are complaining about hunger, why is he imposing a fast for the rest of the day? What kind of general would do that to punish an army for being hungry as opposed to satisfying their hunger to make them into a happier or raising the morale of the fighting force as they continue the battle against the Philistines? Okay, so verse 25, we're on page 80. V'chol haaretz ba'u vayar, vayehi davash al pnei hasadeh. So all the land, and it's translated as "and the people." But it literally means all the land came to the forest. So it's just an unusual wording for the people, for the fighting force, to call them the land, as opposed to they just said Ve'ish Yisrael in verse 24. So why not maintain that and said Ve'ish Yisrael ba'u vayar? Why does it say V'chol haaretz? So Alter translates it, and the fighting moved on. No. It says, and the whole country, came into the forest. Well, that's a stretch calling Aretz country, but Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is a reference to the country of Israel, but it's just not a usual wording. I'm just pointing that out. So we'll see what the commentary, we'll see what Alter says about it. So the people came to the forest, and there was honey in the field, like readily available. So they were tempted by sweets, natural sweets of honey in the forest. 26, Vayavo ha'am el hayar vehine helech devash ve'ein masig yado el piv ki yarei ha'am et ha'shavua. So the people came into the forest. See, verse 25, all the land came into the forest. Now all the people came into the forest, and there was a flow of honey, right? It was just, again, it was tempting to them. They could have easily put their hand out, gotten some honey, put it into their mouth. But nobody reached out their hand to their mouth because the people were afraid for the oath, which Saul had just cursed them with, right? If anybody who eats food for the rest of the day will be cursed. So the people were afraid, and despite the temptation, they didn't eat the honey.
Rabbi,
Yes,
I have an obscure grammatical question. Beginning of verse 25, the Chol Haaretz,
right.
that's the subject of the sentence. Now, I remember learning in Hebrew grammar that there's a pausal form, that when you have sego, like Eretz, at the end of a phrase, it becomes Aretz.
Right.
Like Eretz Yisrael, but Hametzi Lechamin Haaretz.
Right.
Why would it be Aretz as the subject of the sentence, right?
Yes, but that's a good question, Al, and my understanding of grammar is very superficial, and I can't answer your question.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So, what Al's question is for anybody else who's interested in that grammar is you'd have to look at the cantillation marks. So sometimes the formulation of eretz into aretz would come with the cantillation mark that's on ya'ar. So at the end of a phrase or at the end of a sentence, a word that would have an could become an just grammatically to show that we're at the end of the phrase. So because it's the beginning of the phrase, Al's question is, why did eretz become aretz? Okay, so it's good that you noticed it, Al, but I'm sorry that I can't answer your question. Okay, so the people see the honey flowing, and they are afraid to eat any honey because of Saul's curse. 27, V'Yonatan lo shama behashbia aviv et ha'am, vayishlach et ketzei hamateh asher biyado, vayitbol ota beyarat hadavash, vayashev yado el piv, vatarona einav. So Jonathan didn't hear when his father swore to the people, or made an oath with the people, right? So, which is interesting, right? Because at the beginning of this whole story, Jonathan wasn't around, and he kind of did his own thing to start the battle against the Philistines. So now he's not around again, and didn't hear the curse that his father cursed the people. So that's another story that we could get to understand the relationship between Saul and Jonathan. And why isn't Jonathan around? You would imagine that Jonathan, as the firstborn son, or we are assuming he's the firstborn son, Jonathan, as like the champion of Saul's battles, might be Saul's right-hand man and might be around a lot in his inner circle. So why is it that he goes off on his own to start the battle against the Philistines? And why is it that he's on his own and didn't hear his father make the curse? Or he might not have heard it firsthand, but don't you think somebody passed it on? Hey, your father, just in case you didn't hear, your father swore to the whole people not to eat today. So Jonathan doesn't hear the oath that his father gave to the people, and he put the end of his staff, which was in his hand, and he dunked it into the honeycomb, and he brought it back to his mouth, and then so we have to, the word is tarona, his eyes brightened. So I'm not familiar with that Hebrew word, which means brightened, vatarona. So eating the honey caused his eyes to brighten. What does that mean? I have no idea, but what Alter says that the word means his eyes lit up. Okay, so we go on a little bit, and then we'll look at all the commentary. 28, Vaya'an ish me ha'am, vayomer, hashbeya hishbiya avicha et ha'am lemur, arur ha'ish, asher yochal lechem hayom, vaya'af ha'am. So the people, one of the people responded, not answered, but responded to Jonathan eating the honey. So one of the people responded saying, your father verily swore, the hashbeya hishbiya, just emphasizing the idea of Saul making the oath. He verily swore the people, saying, cursed be the man who eats bread today. And the people were faint. Now, they could either be faint with hunger, or they could be faint understanding that here's the champion, the hero of Israel, who led this victorious battle against the Philistines, now was going to be cursed. And so now what's going to happen to the people? So are they fainting because of what's going to happen in battle, or are they fainting because how come Jonathan got to eat and we didn't get to eat? Okay.
Jonah,
29. Yes.
Jonah, you keep saying bread. The text here says food.
Yeah, lechem. I'm translating it literally. Lechem means bread.
Okay.
But
So
it could mean, well, it makes sense to mean food,
Right.
because honey is food. So more to translate lechem, which is specifically bread, as the more generic food, makes sense in context. So what did, Alter translates it as food also. So, yeah, I'm just, I was just translating it literally. 29, Vayomer Yonatan, Achar Avi et Haaretz, Reuna Ki oru enai, ki ta'amti ma'at devash hazeh. Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. Now, it could also mean my father has troubled the people, because Eretz earlier in verse 25 meant the people. Maybe Jonathan is referring to the people. What does Alter say? My father has stirred up trouble for the land. Okay, see how my eyes have brightened, because I tasted a little of this honey. And 30, Af kilu achol achal hayom ha'am mishlal oivav asher matzah ki ata lo ravta maka ba plishtim. So how much more if what is Haply? I'm not familiar with that word. Happily, I know, but haply? Let's look at the altered translation of this. How much better still if the troops had really eaten today from the booty of their enemies that they found. For then the toll of the Philistines would have been all the greater. So, in other words, I think Jonathan is criticizing his father by talking to the people. Like, the little bit that I ate of the honey brightened my eyes. How much more would all of our eyes would have been brightened, he's saying, if we could have been eating the booty, the loot that we gotten from the Philistines. So, in other words, why did my father make this oath to make us hungry to go without food today, when we should have been taking advantage of and eating all the spoils? Okay, so let's look at the commentaries on 25 through 30. So it's on the bottom here of page 80. Honey upon the ground. Wild bees had made their combs in the holes and branches of trees, and the honey had flowed onto the ground. Put his hand to his mouth, that is, scooped up some honey in his hand. His eyes brightened. They had been dull and dim with hunger and fatigue. Answered, the Hebrew verb is often used in the sense of spoke up. Straightly, that is, strictly. And the people are faint. The comment is that of the speaker, not the words of Saul. Has troubled the land, that is, he imposed unnecessary hardship upon the people. And on 81, had there not been then Philistines? AJ, in construing the clause as a question, agrees with Rashi. The rendering of RV is closer to the Hebrew and makes Jonathan's comment the more forceful. For now has there been no great slaughter among the Philistines. Okay, let's look at Alter on these verses, beginning on the bottom of 3:15. And the whole country came into the forest. This sounds as odd in the Hebrew as in translation, because country, haaretz, is not an idiomatic term for people. Extensive textual surgery yields this conjectural reconstruction of an original clause. And there was honeycomb on the ground. An additional difficulty in this passage is that the common Hebrew term ya'ar, forest, has a rare homonym that means honeycomb. In verse 27, the term that occurs is ya'ara, which is unambiguous, both because with the feminine suffix it can refer only to honeycomb, and because it is joined with davash, honey. But the received text in our verse has the preposition into, which presumes that ya'ar means forest and not honeycomb. Okay, so he's just pointing out the difficulty with the Hebrew, and the really the flow of the wording here. So he goes on 3:16. His eyes lit up. The idiom used for the refreshing effect of a taste of food is a pointed one because, as Shimon bar Ephrat has noted, the verb to light up, the Hebrew verb or, plays antithetically on Saul's cursed Arur, be the man. Okay, so you have, so if we look, right, so if we look in the Hebrew on page 80, where the asterisk is on above the resh, in the second to last word of verse 27, Vatarona enav, you have the asterisk over the resh and the aleph, okay? And then the word for curse is in the third line of verse 27, arur, aleph resh, vav resh. So this person that Alter is quoting is making a verbal play on the resh aleph, aleph resh combinations there. Okay. Alter goes on, my father has stirred up trouble. The verb achar that is used here is doubly important. Etymologically, it means to muddy, as in stirring up muck in a pond. Thus, it is an antithesis to the lighting up of the eyes Jonathan has just experienced through partaking of food. It's also the verb yiftach invokes when he sees it is his daughter who has come out to greet him. And you have been among those who stir up trouble for me, back in Judges 11. The echo sets up a network of intertextual links with the Yiftach story. Here, too, a father who is a military leader seeks to influence the outcome of the battle by a rash vow that is an unwitting death sentence on his own child. Right? Remember that Yiftach said, the first living thing that comes out to greet me, I will offer up to God. And it turns out that his daughter is the one who greets him. And then the story then moves on with the ambiguity, did Yiftach actually fulfill the vow or not? And here, Saul says, cursed be the one who will eat today. And then Jonathan, his son, is the one who eats. So that's why the people possibly grow faint, because now they realize that that Saul's son is the one who's going to be cursed. So what's going to happen? So, okay. So that now let's go on. Yes, Barry, you're muted.
Isn't there? I seem to remember, and maybe this was in the Talmud class, where you talked about how sometimes the rabbis didn't want the people to know too many of the specific rules because they would violate them and thus be, and that would be worse than if they didn't know what the rules were. There was something I remember because so here's an example of course it's not from God, it's from the Father saying, you're going to be cursed if you eat it. But if he didn't hear that, does that curse go in effect? I mean,
Right. So, yeah, that's an interesting question. So, if you don't know a law, does that exempt you from punishment regarding breaking the law? So, no, I don't think in American law that you can claim ignorance if you you know, have do tax fraud or something like that. You can't claim ignorance of the law in order to exempt you from punishment. So everybody is supposed to know the law. So what about a curse, though? So I would, so it's unclear because Saul made the curse active upon the people he's addressing. So was he intending, did he think that Jonathan was in attendance? Or did he know that Jonathan wasn't in attendance? So therefore the curse, Saul knew that the curse didn't apply to him. So I don't know the rules when it comes to curses. I will say that it's different than law. Law is an objective reality. Curses and blessings, that's in the hand of God, in the hand of magicians. So I don't know.
I think that the Talmud, if I remember correctly, because it was a while back, the Talmudic discussion was in the interpretation of the commandment and how far you would take it. And if you took it to the extreme limits, it would put a lot of the people in danger. I just remembered it was a very interesting
yes.
conversation rabbinically.
Right. Well, there's always a question of the rabbis of how what kind of laws to enact, and whether there's a sense that the people would be able to follow the law as enacted or not. And that's something that the rabbis have to take into consideration when they're coming up with new interpretations and new laws. Yeah, but it's different. It's very different when it comes to curses and blessings, because that's a whole different kind of realm of it's, I wouldn't even call it spirituality. It's a whole different realm of power in the universe. And this is a power that, yes, the rabbis of the Mishnah and Talmud have, but the average person doesn't have. Barbara, oh wait, Marlene, did you have a question? Yes.
Yeah, but Barbara was first, so let her
No, you
speak.
go ahead. On my screen, you're the one that's prominent, so go ahead.
No. But let Barbara go first. She had her
It's all
hand up
right,
before me.
Marlene, go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead. We'll have
Okay.
time for
No,
both.
just to Barry's point is like I think I heard the same thing about like one interpretations of Moses, when he broke the tablets. Kind of the
Yes.
thought, like one that if he broke the tablets and there were no rules, and the people wouldn't have sinned as much because they didn't know. So it's just the
Oh,
same thought that Barry had, and that's just one thing
oh,
I think I learned long ago. Whether
uh-huh.
just one interpretation. So
Okay.
something to that,
Right.
maybe.
So that's an interesting interpretation of the breaking of the tablets, that it's not out of anger, but out of saving the people from punishment. But uh, the people do get punished in that story of the golden calf. But it's an interesting idea. Yeah, Barbara.
Um, you've said before it read that Jonathan did not hear.
Yeah.
But another was, did Jonathan hear but did not listen?
Okay. So the word shama does mean hear, but it also could mean obey. So or pay attention. It's like when we say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Does it mean hear? Does it mean pay attention? Does it mean obey? Yes, to all of that. So it is. One could read that as Jonathan disobeyed. So yeah. But again, it begs the question: what is the relationship between Saul and Jonathan, and the text itself does not help us there, and doesn't give us any background as to What was Jonathan's role in the inner circle of advisors to Saul? Is he just a renegade? Does Saul respect him at all? We know nothing about this that would help us translate Shema back in back in verse 27. So we don't know whether it means that he didn't hear simply because he wasn't there, or he intentionally disobeyed. So if we knew the background, it could help us translate that better. So instead, we're left to come up with different scenarios, which Barbara's translation of it could be lead to one scenario, or another translation could lead to a different scenario. And we're just left with the ambiguity. Okay, so we left off Jonathan saying that, this little bit of honey brightened my eyes. If only all of us could have been able to take advantage of all of the spoils of the Philistines. So 31, Vayaku bayomahu ba-plishtim mimichmas ayalona vaya'af ha'am me'od. So the people slayed the Philistines on that day from Michmas to Ayalon. The expressway, by the way, in Tel Aviv is the Ayalon Expressway, based on the stream, the Ayalon stream, over which or next to that highway is built. So, yeah, so that we know where Michmas is, we don't know. But if it's somewhere closer to Jerusalem, that's a long way from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, that they caused the Philistines, like they routed them. And the people were very faint from all that work. So in other words, Jonathan was saying, hey, we'll enjoy the spoils. Let's keep on going against the Philistines. So they kept on going, and they slayed them, and they were extremely faint. 32, Vaya'as. Okay, now it tells us the asterisk there on the letter sin leads us below the line here under the text. You see in the very small print, verse 32, Vaya'at. The letter sin is supposed to be a letter tet. Vaya'at ha'am el, and then an asterisk here in this empty space that's telling us below that it's supposed to be the letter hey. So Vaya'at ha'am el ha'shalal, vayikhu tson uvakar, uvene vakar, vayishchatu artsa, vayochal ha'am al hadam. So the people flew onto the spoils and they took sheep and cattle and calves, and they slaughtered it on the ground, and the people ate with the blood. Now that we know, as good Jews, and even as good Israelites, you're not supposed to eat the blood. But they ate the blood with the meat. Excuse me. 33. Vayagidu lishaul lemor, hine ha'am chotim la'adonai, le'echol al hadam. Vayomer begadatem, golu elai hayom even gedolah. And they told Saul, saying, hey, the people have sinned to God by eating the blood. And he said, you have done treacherously. Roll to me today a large stone. 34. Vayomer Shaul putzu va'am Va'amartem lahem, hagishu elai ish shoro, ve'ish seyehu, ushechatetem bazeh, ve'achaltem. Velo techetu la'Adonai le'echol el hadam, vayagishu kol ha'am ish shoro biyado halayla, vayishchatu sham. So Saul said, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, bring to me everyone his ox and everyone his sheep, and slaughter them and eat them, and you shall eat them, and this way you will not have sinned to God by eating the blood. And so in other words, you have to bring a sacrifice to atone for eating the blood. This is what you have to do, bring an ox and a sheep. And all the people brought their ox in hand that night, and they slaughtered them there. 35, Vayiven Shaul Mizbeach Ladonai, Oto Heichel Livnot Mizbeach Ladonai. And Saul built an altar to God. It was the first to be built as an altar to God. Or it was the first altar that he built to God.
Reverend,
Yes.
my question is that Saul we have heard a curse
Yes.
that there's supposed to be not eating.
That day. This might
Is
be the
this-
next day.
We're assuming this is the next day?
I don't know. Again, it's another way the text is not clear, but the idea that they were slaying the Philistines after hearing Jonathan say to them, look what this little bit of honey did to me, go out and get some spoils so that you can get some blessing. And then they go out and slay the Philistines all the way to Ayalon from Michmas. I'm suggesting that's a long way to go, and it would take more than a day to do that, so that it's not the same day as Saul's curse. Now, is Saul's curse limited to just one day, or is Saul's curse a broad curse for until I say the curse is over? So again, we don't know the limits of the curse. We don't know how long it took to to slay the Philistines to Michmas, and we don't know how long it took for people to go and get their ox and sheep and come back and slaughter it. Like, where are the people coming from? Like that they had to go back to home to get their ox and sheep, right? So this is not one day, but I imagine several days. So I don't know if the curse is still in effect or not.
Okay.
But it's a legitimate question, Dove.
He
But
does say this day. I
But
mean,
this day for the
For the
what? For the curse? The curse
The
is
curse.
this day.
Yeah.
Yes, but this day could mean from this day forward.
well,
This day can mean that. But it could also mean literally this day.
it's also interesting that he doesn't call what he's asking the people to do as a making amends. He's just telling them to do it without actually saying this is a sacrifice to make up for what you did.
Well, no, he says,
Well, he says build an altar and bring
so-
me the things, but he doesn't say
no,
exactly
he
why.
says in verse 34, and sin not against the Lord in eating with the blood. So now is that, in other words, are they going to be eating this sacrifice that they're offering and they're going to be eating it without the blood? Or is it an atonement for the eating of the blood that they had done before? Again, the Hebrew is ambiguous. So there's lots of ambiguity in the text. And it's good that all of you are finding even more ambiguities that I have originally found in the text. And this is the problem with the book of Samuel, that we find the narrative to be very difficult, which leads Alter to point out to use sometimes the Septuagint translation to help make more sense of the text. Now that's cheating, I think, in using this, because I think the Septuagint cheats by fixing the text in this way. But the Septuagint is 2,000 years old. So it's an ancient cheating, but it could still be part of our tradition. It's still part of our tradition, the Septuagint. But this text is really the authoritative text for us. But we can use the Septuagint, and then I think also the medieval commentators help to try to fix the text so that we understand. But okay, let me say it this way. If we're trying to derive law from this story, then we're in trouble because of the ambiguities. But there's no law to be derived here. There are lessons to be learned about the heroes of our tradition. So understanding the story in a particular way helps us understand Saul in a particular way and Jonathan in a particular way. And so it becomes important, understanding the text as well as we can, to give us a particular perspective on Saul and Jonathan. So there's a particular perspective that we can learn from reading the text itself. And then there's the perspective that the rabbis have, which becomes, I wouldn't say authoritative, because it's not, again, legal, but it's the traditional perspective on how we're supposed to understand Saul and Jonathan. It's like how we understand Jacob and Esau, right? The text of the Torah presents Esau in a particular way that isn't necessarily so bad. But the rabbis add layers to it to make him into an evil idolater. Okay, and that's how traditionally we're supposed to understand the character of Esau, which leads Esau to become then the symbol of the Roman Empire, which is evil, and the church, which, with its crusades and other anti-Semitic activity, is also the embodiment of Esau. Okay, so it has generational impact, the understanding of Esau. Now, Saul and Jonathan doesn't have generational impact, but it's still the Jewish traditional perspective is a perspective. And, we could try to see a different perspective and try to promote a different understanding of Saul and Jonathan. But in the end, who really cares? And I don't mean that derogatorily. I'm just saying that Jewish law, it matters. So, in other words, if we could read the text of the Torah to say that we are allowed to eat meat and dairy together and try to raise awareness and try to gain followers in the community, that would have some kind of impact on Jewish life, to say that now meat and milk is allowed to be eaten together. So that would have more impact than Saul's really a good guy. In the end, it doesn't matter. Okay, so Dov, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so let's look at the commentary that we missed out on these verses. So 31 to 35, down below on 81. Ayalon, near the edge of the Philistine plain, the distance from Michmas was about 18 miles. Okay, so if that's correct, yes, this is as the crow flies. Again, so if we're in the hill country of Judea or Benjamin, going all the way to the Ayalon, and if the Ayalon is the Ayalon Expressway in Tel Aviv today, that does make sense that that's about 18 miles. Now, it's certainly with traffic a lot longer, and certainly by foot and doing battle, it certainly takes a long time. Okay, 32, the spoil. The Philistines had brought live cattle with them as provisions, and the Israelites slaughtered them as food. Did eat them with the blood. In transgression of the commandment, you shall not eat with the blood. But as the Talmud and Jewish commentators hold diverse views on the exact meaning of the prohibition there, so they disagree on the interpretation of the offense here and the nature of Saul's remedy. Okay, so before I continue, there really is no remedy for violating that law of eating the blood with the meat, because it's a basic law that is one of the 7 laws of the children of Noah. So that precedes Mount Sinai. So that makes it more of a foundational law. Like, do not murder is one of the 7 laws of the children of Noah, and also don't eat the blood with the flesh. So if you violate one of those laws, you have to be executed for that. You can't bring an atonement sacrifice to say,
I thought
oops.
the Noahide law was not eat the live flesh, like that you had to kill the animal first.
Yeah, the words of the Torah said don't do that. But the rabbi's interpretation of those verses, right? That if we just read those verses straight, there's no 7 laws that we come up with. The rabbi's interpretation of those verses come up with the 7 laws. Okay, and one of those 7 laws is don't eat the blood with the. But no, also one of the verses does say specifically don't eat the blood. So on your own, go back to Genesis 9 and you'll see it. Okay, so my point is, though, you violate that core law, you need to be executed for it. So that's why the rabbis would be discussing how Saul on his own is suggesting bringing a sacrifice to atone for eating the blood that they had done. Okay. The Talmudic view is that the animals were consecrated as peace offerings, but were eaten before the blood had been sprinkled. Saul therefore set up an altar stone so that the blood might be poured on it. Ralbag, another medieval commentator, holds that the sin was that of eating in the very place where the blood had been poured out, a heathenish practice, and that Saul insisted on slaughtering by the stone so that the animal would be consumed in a place other than that in which the blood had been shed. Okay, so the rabbis are going overboard to try to say that the Israelites did not sin by actually eating blood. They were doing other things with the blood, even though the Hebrew says specifically at the end of verse 32, Vayochal ha'am al hadam. The people, so if we translate it literally, it means the people ate on the blood. But it seems that the English is the wording is supposed to mean the people ate with the blood. Okay? So, but the fact that it says al hadam allows the rabbis, these commentators and others, to interpret it differently and to give the Israelites the benefit of the doubt that they actually were not eating blood. According to Kimchi, another medieval commentator, the offense was that they slew the beasts on the ground with the result that the blood could not drain away properly. Siegel's interpretation seems best to meet all the circumstances. The people were so famished that they ate the meat before there had been time for the blood to drain away. All the indications are that the meat was eaten raw, not an uncommon practice in those days. Saul therefore set up a stone as an altar and gave orders that the animals were to be brought as sacrifices so that the full ritual of sprinkling the blood might be observed. Unless the stone had been used as an altar, there would be little reason for the statement in verse 35 in this connection. Okay, this day, that is immediately. And then 35 on 82, the same was the first altar that he built. Literally with it, he made a beginning of altar building. His sacrifice at Gilgal in chapter 13 had been on an altar which already existed. So this is the first one that Saul built. Okay, so let's look at altar. on these verses. Okay, on 3:16, and they struck down the Philistines. Although the form of the two verbs does not indicate it, the narrative logic of the scene compels us to construe this sentence as a pluperfect summary of the day's action, responding to Jonathan's reference to the toll, literally blow, exacted from the Philistines. The troops pounced on the booty, ate them together with the blood. The first verb here has pejorative force, being generally used for birds of prey descending on their victims. Biblical law repeatedly prohibits the consumption of meat together with the blood because the blood is regarded as the sacred stuff of life. The slaughtering on the ground here would make it more difficult to allow the blood to drain off, as would have been done in slaughtering on a stone platform or altar. Note Saul's correction of the practice in verses 33 and 34. Jonathan's tasting a bit of honey thus leads to an orgy of gluttonous consumption of meat with blood. This consequence attaches an association of violation of sacred law to Jonathan's act, but the ultimate fault lies with Saul, who by imposing a fast on already famished men has set them up to abandon all restraint the moment the taboo against eating is broken. What he had in hand, this accords with the Septuagint, asher biado, against the Masoretic, his bull in his hand, shoro biado. Okay, so just a grammatical thing there. Okay, it's 10:27, so we'll stop here for today. We will meet next week. The question is the following week, which is the Friday after Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving. So when I send out the recording of today's class, let me know. I'll ask a question whether you're going to be around the day after on Black Friday to have class or not. So based on what you say, we'll determine whether we have class on the day after Thanksgiving or not. Okay, so have a good rest of the day, everybody. Shabbat shalom, and we'll see you next
Shalom.
week.
Thank you.
Shalom. Thank you.